Welcome to the final tier of the urban legend Iceberg. If you want to see the original image of the iceberg, you can look in the description below and find the original Reddit post where the user darkmoon230 originally posted this image on Reddit. They are a close friend to me, and I would appreciate it if you gave them some kind of shout out or commented on their Reddit post. Thank you. Let's explore the iceberg. The Ratman of Southend is an entity that is said to inhabit the town of Southend-on-Sea. This being is either said to be a ghost or a living, breathing creature ready to pounce on its victims. The ghost story states that there was once a homeless man who was almost beaten to death by a gang of youths. As the man lay there after the attack, rats started to feast on him as he started a torturously slow death. It's said that in this underpass you can hear high-pitched squeaking and nails being dragged along the walls, and you may see a hybrid of a man and a rat, both fused together from their deaths on that cold dark night. This other story illustrates how the mayor of Southend was once a frequent adulterer and was one day caught off guard after finding out that a woman who he had previously been with was pregnant. When she gave birth to this child, he saw that this was no ordinary child, as it seemed to resemble that of a rat and a human. This child began to show more characteristics to that of a rat, rather than that of a human, with this child growing a tail, its nose becoming a snout, and its eventual taste and need for other people's blood. So the mayor decided that the best case for this child would be to encase it in a prison underneath an underpass within its walls, so the general public would never know of its existence. However, this creature chewed its way out the walls, and from that day forth has wreaked havoc in Southend, looking for its next victim in the underpass. The gay roommate is an urban legend about two men who share the same room in their college dormitory. When one man realises that he's getting terrible headaches every morning and goes to the doctor to try and find out what is going wrong, the doctor performs several examinations and discovers that nothing is wrong with the patient's head, but discovers that he is bleeding quite a lot from his rectal area. This doctor suggests that the man should stop having so much sex, but the man refuses, saying that he's never had sex. Intrigued by this, the man goes back to his dormitory and begins to search all around his room, which leads to a possible reason for this bleeding. He discovers a bottle of chloroform or ether hidden in his roommate's possessions. This man discovers that his roommate has been using this to sedate him and has been having sex with him. In some versions of this legend, the man punishes this roommate by humiliating him in front of the whole campus full of students, so that everyone knows how dangerous this individual is. This urban legend seems to have mutated from a World War II legend, where it was about two military men, and this legend has been reported as far back as 1882, where apparently Arabian businessmen would perform horrific actions on young sailors that they brought back from late-night bars. However, this is most likely a homophobic legend, told to spread panic about homosexuality amongst college students, as no cases of such a legend have ever been reported. A red cap is a creature that is said to roam destroyed or ruined castles in the wilderness between Scotland and England. This creature is described as being similar to a goblin, with its height resembling a minuscule person. It's said to have dried up skin, sharp teeth, and is coated in a suit of miniature armour suited for its body. The red cap apparently waits for its victims to pass, and then will strike out against them, using a nearby rock or boulder to knock out the unsuspecting victim. Then this creature will use its scythe upon the victim's throat, drawing out as much blood as possible before the next visitor comes along. A red cap needs blood to survive, as it puts the blood gathered on its head, so it will drip down and eventually dry to create a substance which looks similar to a cap, hence where its name comes from. However, it's said when this substance runs too dry, then this creature itself will die. In London, in the year 1790, there are reports of a man who would go around and cut holes in women's dresses, then stab the woman's thigh or buttock, and would repeatedly swear at them before running off. This man was known as the London Monster. This happened several times, with witness accounts varying from supposedly true to being that the witness reported this so they could attract sympathy and kindness from members of the public. But this matter would get so out of hand that whilst the press were reporting on this situation, there were wanted posters created for this London monster to be captured, with a £100 reward to whoever would find this person. A man by the name of Runwick Williams was eventually brought in as a suspect to the police. However, several of the witnesses didn't recognise this man as their attacker, and he had an alibi that he was working at an artificial flower factory at which he worked. This case was put back and forward between several courts and several judges until it was declared that this man was guilty and was unjustly sentenced to 6 years in prison. However, there was never any real evidence which suggested that this man committed these crimes, and a London monster is nowadays considered to be a case of mass hysteria or a case of several pickpocketings gone wrong. In this story, it said that on the 4th of July in 1873, a large hurricane was hurled through the Miami Valley, leaving miles of debris behind it. A farm by the name of Anderson Farm was inspecting their trees that had been damaged, when all of a sudden they discovered a skeleton inside one of the trees. The skeleton inside of the tree seemed to be quite aged, as its bones started to turn yellow, but the jacket worn by the skeleton seemed to be in remarkably good condition for how long the skeleton had been there for. Inside the jacket, there was a diary which had dates and currency dating back to 1776. In this diary, it stated that the man was a soldier called Rodger Vanderburd. This diary stated that he was fighting against the Native Americans in a battle when his side eventually lost. He was captured by the Native Americans and was going to be taken away, but he luckily managed to escape. However, he was greatly injured in this battle and mangled his arm in such a way where he could no longer move it, as well as his legs being almost decimated by the fighting as well. Rodger Vanderburd managed to crawl into a tree. His only options were to stay in the tree and wait for someone to save him, or to give himself up to the Native Americans and be tortured, and most likely eventually die. He chose to wait in the tree, starving, thirsty, and injured, forever waiting for someone to find him. The Warden of Burnbeck Halls is an urban legend that is popular amongst students quite recently in the area of Weston Super Mare in England. Students have reported that they can sometimes see strange orange lights outside of their doors in the middle of the night, as well as hearing loud stomping and thumping from what sounds like very large boots with a rattle of chains behind them. This being is said to kidnap anyone who attempts to open their door when they start to see or hear pre-mentioned strange occurrences outside. Allegedly, students have been kidnapped in the middle of the night and never heard from again. It's said that they are dragged by this entity to the entrance of hell underneath the basement of the building. This creature is known as the Warden of Burnbeck Halls, as it seems to go after students who make too much noise in the middle of the night, or those who might be up to mischievous acts in the basement area. Those who have caught a glimpse of this entity describe it as being made up of burning charcoal, pieces of metal moulded into its skin. Rumours from students state that this entity once was a warden who worked at an insane asylum which was built upon the grounds of Burnbeck Halls before it was demolished. It's said that this warden was doing his nightly patrols of the building when he was suddenly taken aback by some inmates who held him hostage. These inmates are said to have been badly treated by the warden, and he's said to have locked them in the basement area in complete darkness for months at a time for merely not being in their rooms at the correct time he ordered them to be. The inmates threw this warden into the furnace of the building, and he eventually burned to death in searing pain, with no one finding out about his demise until they found his skeletal remains in the ashes of the furnace. I've actually been to Burnbeck Halls, and the atmosphere feels definitely eerie in some parts of the building, as some parts seem to resemble the Overlook Hotel in The Shining, especially the lounge area, which has a hanging chandelier and the general Kubrick-like atmosphere. But the most eerie part of all is the basement, and the entrance to the basement with an unlit staircase which leads you down into complete darkness. When you enter into the basement, it feels like you've entered into someone's lair almost, and like someone's watching you and waiting to pounce out at you, with just a feeling like a pair of eyes are watching you at all times, from an unknown location. But maybe you can take a trip there for yourself and see if there really is a demonic warden at Burnbeck Halls. This entry refers to a story which appears in the urban legend known as Kubeza Devaka, which is known in traditional Japanese as Gozu. This name itself is said to create a feeling of uneasiness to whoever hears it muttered, even though the person themselves might not know why, their body and their mind does. The most popular interpretation of this urban legend goes that the teacher is telling scary and disturbing stories to his students on a bus trip when they start to challenge him to tell the most scary, disturbing, inhumane and ungodly story he knows. So he starts to tell them the tale of Gozu. The students begin to get visibly frightened the more he continues, but the more he continues, the more passionate he gets into the story. As soon as he stops for a second of breath, a young boy tells him to stop telling the story immediately, but the teacher carries on until he's finished the entire story, at which point both of his eyes have gone white and he falls to the floor. He wakes, discovering the bodies of all of the students and the bus driver with white foam coming out of their mouths. To this day, this teacher has refused to retell the story, and all copies of this story were deemed too dangerous by the Japanese government. At this moment, only those who remember the story are the only ones who are able to recount it, and those who are brave and foolish enough to recount it are ready to tell of the horrors inside of it. Thank you for making it through this Iceberg series with me. I think I've had quite a pleasant time working on it, and it's been nice seeing all the interactions I've got from my audience so far. These urban legends have been really interesting to look into, and I would love to look into some more urban legends, but at the moment I have an idea for another series that I'd like to work on. Please subscribe if you'd like to follow where Bernard Anderson goes next. Thank you so much for watching, and good night.